us to not hit 100.
I guess we got one more hot day, and then it's supposed to maybe possibly cool down a little bit,
know.
start
Feel
raining
like-
a little bit.
Video over 90s.
We just got back from the Bahamas. Oh
which
my
is kind of
gosh, it was so hot. Oh, it's like walking out of a sauna.
It's hot.
Oh, I was wringing wet. 5 minutes after I was out, time out, gonna go change clothes. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Took the grandkids and we all.
Looks like we're live, is that right? Okay. We'd like to welcome everyone out to our Riverdale City Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, July 23rd. We have all planning commissioners present with the exception of Commissioner Nye, who is excused. We'd like to open up for public comment, but not seeing any public present. We will pass on that and then move to item C on the agenda, presentation and reports. Mr. Cooper.
I think there's a number of obvious things going on in the city with the Gengarf Honda remodel and the Kia remodel. We do not have any movement on the smoked taco, unfortunately. We have received some remodel plans for the Walmart, so there's some significant remodel plans for that place. You've probably seen some re-landscaping happening. They'll change out some signage and they'll move some things around in the store and freshen it up. So that'll be fun.
They are moving things around.
Yeah, it's already happening.
Already happening. Oh,
Yes.
they've jumped the gun.
Yeah, they've blocked off a southern portion of the parking lot, and they've got
Yeah.
freight containers
Yeah,
in there
you're
with
right.
a lot of their
Yeah, the
equipment.
inside is, good luck finding something.
Yeah, it's totally changed. Aisles.
It'll be better when it's done,
It
though.
will be.
We are in desperate need of it.
Yeah, it has needed it for a while.
But for those folks like my wife who have memorized the store and create their shopping list accordingly, it'll drive them crazy.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be rough for a minute
Yeah.
on a few of us.
Couple of questions that I have, if I may, and maybe some of them we can talk in our discussion at the end of the meeting. But I noticed Riverdale Townhomes, their extension expires August 1st. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, they've applied for a building permit.
They have applied. Okay.
Yep.
Just
So we're
curious on
reviewing that right
because I
now.
noticed, I did a drive around and saw that Coleman Farms or Coleman View Estates, they're doing a lot of the excavation work. But America First with that roundabout, they're doing nothing with that. Are they still fighting that issue with the lines?
They are. Rocky Mountain Power and some other fiber utilities and the Weber Basin water line all still need to be complete before the roundabout can be finished. They provided an update to me the other day stating that they hope to get all of that resolved and paved before our paving deadline, which I believe is October 15th. I'm cautiously optimistic about that. And then the widening of 1500, which is associated with that, won't happen until actually next spring. So they've already anticipated they won't make that paving deadline for the widening, especially along the frontage of Tesla, which is almost finished. And so we're working that out right now, how to coordinate some of those things.
Yeah, it looks like Tesla is almost done. They've got the parking lot in and,
Signs up.
yeah.
Yep, they'll be out of there by the end of the month.
Is Motel 6 still there?
Motel 6 is still there.
Their sign is,
They are going through a transition right now, and so there has been a notice to vacate of all tenancy there. So it'll be empty
That was one of my questions. that I
by
was
the end
gonna
of the
bring up
month,
at
I
the end.
believe.
Wasn't UDOT going to kind of intercept that area to head north on I-15 off of Riverdale?
That's the plan. It's called a slip ramp, and so the ideal situation would be that as the interchange is changed, that a slip ramp just feeds right into the west roundabout there, And that's not fully designed, it's not fully approved. If that happens, it'd be the very western section of the Motel 6 and some other properties there that it would take up.
What about the widening of 4400 under I-84? Any movement on that area?
Lots of movement, actually. We've been working with UDOT on a betterment agreement, so that has been signed by the mayor, and that contributes about $1.6 million of city funds to making sure that those bridges are done in a way that's consistent with our plans in that area. And they should be commencing work after they finish all of their pre-design and their costing and bidding, which I have been told is later this year.
Well, I noticed that the city council, part of their approval was that from the roundabout west, it's 4 lanes.
Mm-hmm.
From the roundabout east, it's 3 lanes. And so that they had approved that, and that America First is contributing a large chunk of funds to
All of it.
Yeah.
The 1.6 that
I didn't know
UDOT's
if the
requiring.
1.6 was them, or you mentioned the city.
It's the city's agreement. So UDOT and the city signed the betterment agreement, but then we have a subsequent agreement between the RDA
Okay.
and America First for the payment of
Where
those
they'll
funds.
be covering that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it worked out great. And that will ultimately be a 4-way stop. So those roundabouts are scheduled to be removed, and that would be a lighted 4-way.
Oh,
You're talking about the ones on 4400?
Mm-hmm.
All 3 of them?
I think only
Middle.
2.
Just 2?
Yeah.
The one on the Roy side would remain?
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that.
That's it?
I said I don't know how I feel about that.
That's in the plan.
Yeah.
That's all it is right now, is a little drawing on a piece of paper. So we'll see how that goes. But the traffic study warrants such a thing. That's where it comes from.
Are they still proceeding with the roundabout on Ritter Drive and
5 points.
5 Point intersection? That's still a go?
Yep, I'm working with UDOT and the engineer as we speak. We're trying to coincide that work with the development of the subdivision so that when the first phase gets open in the next 18 to 20 months, that we have the infrastructure to support the increased traffic.
How about Freeway Park Drive? Are they going to just keep that as not any roundabout up there on Ritter and Freeway Park?
Yeah.
What's going on there? That's nothing,
I don't know of a roundabout there.
okay, just a regular stop sign?
Mm-hmm.
'Cause there's going to be a lot of traffic coming through there. I was just curious if they're going to change that area up there with the freeway changes.
I don't know of any changes like that. I could be, out of the loop on that, but I don't know of any. Good questions. Lots going on.
What about the homes down there on Pacific Avenue, the apartments,
That's what he was just mentioning. Those,
Riverdale townhouses.
townhouses? That's one. Okay, gotcha.
they're under review for building permits, so hopefully we'll
That's
get
the
that
one-
out
yeah,
the door
that's
here
when
soon.
you said it was almost expired.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. We'll next move to, thank you for that. And we'll next move to our consent items, which would be consideration for the meeting minutes approval for the May 14th work session and regular meeting. Any discussion on those minutes? If not, then a motion would be in order.
I move that we approve the consent items.
Okay,
I second.
all in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. We'll next move to our action items. Item E, discussion regarding the review of proposed amendments to Planning Commission bylaws and rules of ethical conduct. Mr. Cooper, please.
Thank you.
Turn that over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So as we discussed in work session, it becomes necessary from time to time for the commission to look at their bylaws. And so as we have gone over the current bylaws. We have a number of changes that we'd like to discuss tonight. We're not proposing any action because in the case of some of the changes, there are implications to the city ordinance that would have to be dealt with under another process, and I'll describe that here in just a moment. So turning our attention to the actual bylaws, if you've read that in your packet, you'll notice that a lot of the changes are perfunctory. It's grammatical in nature for the most part. And then there's a large section at the end where it references state code. And this was essentially swapped out in its entirety for the most current state code, instead of trying to go through sentence by sentence and making red lines. We elected to just strike the entire reference of the previous state code and include the new state code. So if you've read that, that should make sense. The bulk of the changes that are the most impactful to the process that we're used to are found in the application section, the application presentation section. So you'll see there that there are some items that have been struck from the document, and those are related to section A, that first section there where it's talking about site plan and zoning applications. So what we found is that the bylaws didn't recognize other applications or petitions that the commission might receive, most specifically subdivision applications. And so we've done a couple of things there. In the first section, we've struck this idea of a preliminary approval of a site plan. So what happens now is that city staff would receive an application for a site plan approval. We would usually meet with the applicant on a conceptual basis. We'd go over the checklist that's on our application to ensure that they understand all of the things that are required for a site plan application. We look at some form of rudimentary drawing, usually that they've created to address the idea that they're trying to present. And then from that, they have a formal submission, which is the formal application. They pay a fee, and hopefully that application and the associated drawings have complied with all of the things in the checklist. Our job as city staff, myself, the city engineer, the city public works director, fire chief, in some cases the police chief, our job is to review that application and to make sure that it's in conformance with all of the city rules, regulations, and ordinances. Previously, and what we're proposing is up for discussion tonight, previously we would bring that incomplete partial application to you as the commission to cover all of the things that are incomplete and partially there. And so from that discussion, you would be able to, your action usually is go back and satisfy the city's comments. And once you do that, bring it back for a final. So we felt that is actually out of the ordinary. A lot of cities don't have that preliminary site plan review by the Planning Commission, and fairly redundant. So as it's written here in this revision, we're proposing to strike that preliminary approval step in the bylaws, and because it's codified in the ordinance, it does have implications to the city ordinance that would have to be dealt with. But for tonight's discussion, we'd just like to hear some feedback on that. And then the second change is an addition of a whole new section, which actually is more reflective of what our city ordinance calls for, and that is the subdivision applications that we receive are also important documents that you review, and there is a conceptual preliminary and final approval that you would conduct as a commission. And so those are the two real substantive changes, the removal of a preliminary approval for site plan and other zoning applications, and the addition of the steps required for subdivision applications. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Okay, commissioners, any comments for what's presented here?
I feel like everything was addressed well in the work session.
Yeah, the draft that you've got there, when we come back, as we make these recommendations for these changes, we can still look at some of these and decide whether we want to include those. Now, because in the draft, and we talked about this with the preliminary or the permanent sign. Let me see where that is. Permanent signs. Sometimes it takes me a couple of hits in the head to get that through. But the changes that when we had previously had these presented to the Planning Commission, they were outside of the normal ordinances regarding signs, and that's why we had to look at them and approve them. Is that correct?
Generally speaking.
Okay.
And tonight's proposal in terms of the bylaws doesn't affect any of that. This is specifically to address your bylaws in terms of process that you conduct with site plan and zoning applications. Any related code changes in Title 10 from this decision, and any other code changes that you might want to address, like the review of signage or any other thing that is part of Title 10, that can happen as part of the code revisions that we bring to you related to these bylaw changes. So we're just looking at a very narrow scope right now. There can be other changes made outside of this discussion. And in fact, we have a whole laundry list of those that we'd like to propose. And maybe that's the time to add other things that you want to address as well.
Okay, that makes better sense. Again, it takes me a couple of shots at this to fully.
I'm with you.
Personally, I'm in favor of the proposition that you've presented here, because it did seem that it was just repetitive. We'd have the preliminary, then we would have the final, and I have full faith and confidence in staff that they're going to be able to address everything that needs to be done so that when we look at it, it's clean and ready to go. That's basically what we were doing before it was presented to the city council for final approval, was making sure it was clean and ready to go. And it's just, you get it clean and ready, and then we get it clean and ready, and then without having to have that additional step for the preliminary, I think I'm in favor of that move. So
We think it's good customer service to our developer customers and others, because it does provide some clarity and reliability that once Planning Commission does make a recommendation, that they can move right into City Council approval instead of having this ambiguity between a preliminary and a final, and then having to move to that other step. So that legislative approval is what everyone is looking for. And so if we can shorten the trip between application to legislative approval without skipping any of the quality or any of the steps that we otherwise might take, I think that's good customer service.
Brandon, we briefly talked about feedback from the council on when we recommend things. Do we have when are we hearing anything of like rebuttal from what they're asking that maybe we overlooked or missed, or concerns that they address? We're not hearing any of that coming back to us.
There's nothing to share.
Okay.
Since I've been here since March, everything that the Planning Commission has recommended for approval has been approved without any rebuttal.
Okay.
And so we're batting 1,000 so far. And I think that's because of clean process, right? Our job was well done on both the staff side and the commission side. And so once the council receives a favorable recommendation from the commission, I think they have kind of that stamp of approval in their mind that it is a clean process and that they can have some reliability there. Doesn't mean there isn't questions, but I feel like my job is to predict what questions you all might have and answer them, and then whatever questions that the council might have, answer them with you all. And the 3 or 4 that we've done thus far has worked out that way.
Good.
But I think the feedback loop is important. So if there are things that the council brings up as issues that hasn't been addressed either by staff or the commission, then I do think that those things need to be discussed, and I'll make sure I bring those back to you.
Sounds great. Thank you.
So are there any changes that you would like to add to the proposed changes that we have, or is there anything you would like to, in terms of the entire rules for conduct? So this is to address all the bylaws. So does this accurately reflect how the commission currently operates, or how you would like the commission to currently operate?
Can I just add something real quick? I changed the packet from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m.
I noticed
on
that.
Friday. We've never sent them by 10 a.m., so
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's reasonable.
it's in there now. But if you want me to send them at 10 a.m., I'll send them at 10 a.m.
There are other timelines in there too, as well as in terms of application submittal, number of days prior to the planning commission meeting, and those kind of things. So really that speaks to whether or not you all feel like you're getting the packets in time to make an adequate review before the actual planning commission happens. However long prior to the packet getting to you, to me, that's irrelevant. That's our staff time. And so I didn't change that because I think the 7 days is good. But are you getting the packet in time on a Thursday or Friday, and does that give you enough time to review it by a Tuesday?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm satisfied with that
Yes.
personally, so.
And the
And the
chalkboard.
chalkboard.
Chalkboard, yeah.
I think chalkboards are out.
We were going to hurry and go buy some if you didn't want to take those out.
Okay. Saved you a trip because you couldn't find them if you went into Walmart.
At least on the aisle you think it was on.
Yeah, they'll be somewhere in there.
I think these changes look good from my perspective. I'm satisfied with them. I don't know how the rest of you feel.
Same. I don't see anything that needs to be altered from what we have.
Okay. So is it our recommendation then that we proceed as shown in the draft here, that we move towards the timeline that we have that would do the final review in 2 weeks or at our next meeting, and then set a public hearing thereafter? Does that sound agreeable?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We don't need to make a formal vote on that, do we? Since this is just a discussion.
Yeah, we were just looking for your direction so that we can make whatever changes to the draft that were necessary. If there are none, then we'll proceed with the schedule as you have just given direction on, which means that the next meeting on the 13th, we will have to you proposed code changes that are just specific to the bylaw changes. So there's a number of references, and I have that list here in the packet. And Michelle was nice enough to link these code references to the specific codes. So this is a cursory review of all the areas in our Title 10 that has anything to do with a preliminary site plan approval by the Planning Commission. And so we have to go through all of those code references and strike that to be in compliance with the bylaws. And so that's what we'll bring to you during the next meeting. that can be discussed and reviewed. Then you would can take action on the bylaws, getting those put into place, subject to the fact that the code would be changed at a public hearing, which would be held on the 27th.
Okay. Michelle, that one we may want at 10 o'clock on Friday.
That'll be a big one.
Trying to give you like Wednesday.
Okay, well, let's move then. Any further discussion on this item? Let's move to item F, comments from the Planning Commission and city staff. We addressed that one with Motel 6 because I had been getting feedback from a lot of people. That's in an area that affects our neighborhood and some people that we have been giving assistance to, and knew that they were being told to vacate. There are some rumors out there that they were going to be changing that out to a different entity altogether. And obviously you wouldn't be able to identify that, but
I think I feel comfortable talking about the proposal, given the fact that we met with the new owner yesterday. So the new owner has a portfolio of housing units that are specifically oriented to the low income bracket. And so low income is kind of a defined term, which is 30% of the average median income wage earner. And so his portfolio is such that he takes these underutilized and underperforming assets, motels and other places like that, and converts them from motels to apartments, essentially. And then through tax credits and other forms of subsidy, he's able to then rent those to the 30% AMI group of folks. That he proposed that, and he got $4 million from the state for another project in Ogden and some other things. So he has a group of these things. Given the history of the Motel 6 in terms of its impacts to services with Riverdale, we counseled him to maybe take a different course of action. And so he was willing to enter into a purchase and sale agreement with a buyer that would buy the motel for a totally different use. And so they're in that transaction now. They're under contract. And the due diligence requirements required them to have the building vacant by end of due diligence. And so that's why you're seeing notices.
okay. Yeah, because I know that turned around fairly quick.
Yeah. So if that transaction closes, then the idea of a affordable housing apartment complex would go away, and a new idea would be introduced, and that could be an adaptive reuse to another hotel. It could be a total demolition and reconstruct of something different. We're hoping for the latter, but that's all still preliminary right now.
Okay.
We're good.
You're good? Okay.
We're good.
And America First, you have been kind of dangling the carrot out there that, something was coming and that they were ready to have a site plan approval. Is that still?
Still in review. It's changed a bit. We provided first round comments to their site plan application that comprised of their first office building and the associated site around it. So that was exciting. But then they kind of took a step back and pulled out of that proposal just the hillside. You'll notice that they've totally removed all of the trees and the foliage on that hillside slope. And so they have some pretty awesome plans to build retaining on that hillside and bring back the decorative landscaping and some things. So I think it'll be attractive. It's structural to the buildings happening up on the top and the close proximity to the edge. So it's necessary that they do this. But it is another step in the process where they had to pull it out as a separate site plan review and application. So it delayed the whole thing.
Okay.
With America First, properties that are not being developed yet up there, what is their plan to do with those properties? I hope that they're not just going to let them sit there and go to weed and look and look bad. Do you have any idea as to what their plans are for those?
So we have an amazing code enforcement officer, Steve,
Yeah.
and I'm sure he won't let that happen.
And I can tell you, based on my employment with them, any property they own, because they own it and it's known that they own it, historically they have stepped in and made sure that it was clean and well maintained.
Okay.
So I would be surprised, personally, I would be surprised if, if it became overgrown or a problem. But I mean, if you look at all of the property that they've had surrounding that along the 84, along that small strip, that's always been fairly well taken care of.
We're in talks with them weekly, so if it does become, if it gets away from them a little bit, then we have a forum to address that.
Okay.
So code enforcement, and you've got Parker Drive roundabout, then you've got 1500. The 1500 roundabout, who owns the property on the north? Is that
That's America First.
on the north of it? Of the north of the roundabout?
The roundabout that's currently under construction on 1500.
No. I'm talking
Existing
on
on
4400.
4400.
Oh.
So you've got
4400.
Parker,
4400.
1500, and then
That's
north.
UDOT.
That's
UDOT.
That is UDOT.
Yeah.
Can we get them to enforce that?
We actually had that conversation last week with them.
Because that's those dead Russian olive trees up in there. That's a mess up in there.
What's the latest on UDOT on Riverdale Road, just falling apart on the Weber River, the bridge?
That I have not heard anything about, unfortunately.
It's getting deeper.
Yeah, I know
Even though they covered it with asphalt, it's getting deeper, so something's going on.
Over the
I was just
viaduct.
curious about if they had any major
4400.
I don't know.
action going on there.
I'll make sure I bring that up with Sean and see if we can get some answers. They put a sign up that says road work, so what else do you expect?
Well, that's only the people that don't, abide the law. They got a little plastic sign up there, and you hit that thing at 50 miles an hour, and it's getting pretty bad for some
Yeah, it
vehicles.
is-
And
it
you
is
hit a
bad.
motorcycle on there, that's going to do some damage.
Yeah, you're
So I was
right.
just curious where, I
I'll check and see.
appreciate that, Bren.
Yep.
And maybe I should have brought this up when we were having the discussion about code of ethics and the bylaws and everything. But there was one item that I was reading in there, and from my previous employment, disclosures of employment, when it talks about conflict of interest and disclosures of employment, there was one that said that officers, which I would assume would include commissioners and council members, that they were to report annually to the mayor of any change of employment or I'm trying to remember how to phrase that. Change of employment or status, position status within a organization or a business that operates within the city. So in my case, I worked for America First. Should I have been reporting that? Because these are questions that we all need to be aware of. You, for example, like with Best, what are our responsibilities in reporting? I know conflict of interest, we have to report if there's any action that was taken, and I did that at one time when I was on the commission, and items were presented for America First, and I made that disclosure that I was an employee, and so we were in compliance that way. But what are our responsibilities if we are employed by someone who operates within the city?
So I think if you look at Section B of the bylaws in the packet, there's some guidance there. So first of all, it's citing the city code, and so I think that is probably the guiding language for all conflict of interest issues. But in the case of the bylaws, the person with the conflict needs to state that there is a conflict and actually recuse themselves. And that's the proposed language. The existing language is leave the room. So in effect, it's the same thing. And so it's being proposed that there's just a recusal that takes place, and then in terms of what constitutes a conflict, I'm not an attorney. I'm sure Section 10 states that, but I believe that there's some guiding language there, and the fact that you're an employee of a company isn't necessarily the only conflict that can exist, of course.
Right. But even there were times that I got more than $50 from a prize award or something like that. Should those things necessarily be reported or not?
Yeah, I think if there's some serious questions about conflicts and what constitutes a conflict, I think it's fairly clear in terms of what to do if you feel like there is a conflict. But if you are having questions about what constitutes a conflict, I think maybe we ought to invite Steve Brooks in and give us some guidance on not only state law, but our local ordinance as well.
I just want to make sure that we're operating above board and that there's no question.
Sure.
Well, it's like Amy and myself, we sell real estate. Are we in conflict in Riverdale?
No.
We shouldn't be. But I mean, what constitutes that fine line where, we're practicing a business, but that's our business. I mean, how crazy, if you will, how fine line would this be to say you can or can't do something like that?
And I think
that
what Brandon's saying is Steve's going to be the definitive.
Steve's going to have to answer some of those, but
Yeah.
I do have a little more information on that. I just completely forgot what I was going to say. Sorry.
While she's looking, maybe I could address that question. So obviously, if you're the broker on the transaction that's being presented to you for a site plan application approval, then that probably is a pretty clear line of a conflict.
Right.
But if you're just a general real estate agent that works in the city of Riverdale, I would, just my personal opinion, for the most part, any action that you take wouldn't be in conflict, even though that you buy and sell real estate.
I think the main thing is that, you're not treating people differently because they want something from the planning commission.
Exactly.
any personal
So,
favors.
So, your business needs to be completely separate from your role as a planning commissioner.
Correct.
And as far as being at work, and accepting gifts and things like that, like that's within the realm of that business. So, and we can clarify with Steve, but I don't
but
think
you
that
never
they're
know
meant
how
to
far
cross over.
somebody's going to press the issue
Yep.
and say, and start pointing fingers.
Yeah, but generally it's when somebody comes back and says, but I gave you $100 and now you're going to deny my application,
Yeah.
right? So if
Kickbacks.
you're not doing anything that's
Kickbacks.
going to interfere with any decisions, then you're probably okay.
And so we can put that on the list of training items, conflict training and or conflict of interest training, and invite Steve or someone else that might be qualified to provide that.
Steve would be
I
perfect.
think I would be interested in,
He'll be super excited.
I'm sure.
He'd probably just come and say, if you have doubt, don't do it.
Probably.
I'll leave it out. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, on another note, in our work session on presentation and reports, why we don't get updates unless we're down here.
I think it was a matter of time for this one.
What was that?
It was a matter of time for this one.
Okay.
Because we wanted to get the training, moving along because we haven't had a meeting for a couple of sessions. So that was just a thought.
Okay.
Yeah, we've only got a 30-minute window upstairs,
Right.
whereas,
I guess we could sit here all night.
You're on TV.
Rather not.
any motion?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second Rick's motion.
To adjourn?
I'll second Rick's motion.
You bet. I move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We stand adjourned. Thank you for that tonight.
World we live in.